what he does off the top. So I'm very, so go ahead.
We're rolling. So anyway, this is Brian Stevens and
Micheal Valdez.
All right, and we're going to chat with you a little bit about Micheal. You and Dan were the founders. Why don't you go back and just roll back a little bit about the Business Transition Council, because all the meat in between is going to be great, but I need the foundation about that for a moment.
And I'm going to take you back prior to actually meeting and knowing Dan. There's a gentleman who has since passed away who was a top tier JD LLM tax attorney, Stratton Smith. And Stratton and I were having conversations about business owners, entrepreneurs in particular, and the special needs they had and the challenges that they had. And it goes back even a little further of, how do we serve them? Because there's so many things that they need. And at one time, Stratton and I had looked at real estate in South Tampa and Hyde Park, and we're considering buying a building to house all the specialists, the team members who sat around what became ultimately the Business Transition Council. Wow. And so along that same time as Stratton and I are having these conversations, I worked and used his law office room in his central room that we worked out of, the boardroom, there where he met with clients. It was a beautiful old antique, of course, building with chandeliers and everything. It was really, really gorgeous. And it was a great place to meet with business owners, and we had a quiet, private room to work from. But that being the case, I had started a predecessor business called Business Exit Planners with a CPA and a CPA JD. Wow. And we were writing succession, exit, and transition plans for that. And as we started that business, we realized we really didn't have all of the components that we needed. It was greater than just legal, accounting, and financial planning that the business owners needed. And so we all went out, got our designations, the certified exit planner from Business Enterprise Institute. And as we were starting that business, we were making great progress. I was then out promoting that business at the Association for Corporate Growth, and I met Dan Maloney. And he was very curious, and I thought it was very interesting because he had come from a CPA background, had worked for a Big Four firm, and then left to run a family business in the Tampa Bay area. And this business was multi-generational, agricultural in nature, and had all kinds of challenges. And so as he was busy doing that, we started talking about that experience, and he said, you talk about this new exit planning thing. What does that actually mean? And does it mean the same thing to you as all these, quote, other people you think should be around the table? So we decided that, that was the question, the fundamental question of who needs to be at the table. What do they know? What's their training? What's their take on this? And so basically, we rented a hall, hired a band, and brought some hors d'oeuvres. And I say that tongue in cheek, but what we did is we went to the Palmacia Country Club and got a room that held 50. And so in the beginning, we were getting more than 50 people trying to show up. So we had to limit the space of our meetings because of what we were doing. Dan and I would chip in to pay for it. And we would get someone who sat in that chair, one of those dozens of chairs that sit around that represent, speak to, and help these business owners. And the business owners we were considering were these probably under $50 million of annual sales, because we recognized that those business owners were the ones who were having the most problem. Once the business got to a couple $100 million, $300-400 million of annual sales, they had worked out most of the problems. And so this whole strategy came from that. So as we did that, we did that for a multitude of years, and we built. We went from being informal in 2005 and 2006 to informally building a 501c3 not-for-profit and a learning organization, and we've been meeting regularly since then, once a month, getting together and having a conversation about succession, exit, and transition planning. And I'm glad later on if you want to ask me about the nuances of those, but we take all three subjects, which are cousins, and we discuss them among ourselves, all the practitioners who are who are helping entrepreneurs and business owners. But that was kind of the beginning or the inspiration of what is this thing called the Business Transition Council, and why have you been doing it for 20 years, and how come no one really knows about it?
I gotcha. So, what percentage of business owners finally exit their business at some point?
Well, there's a lot of statistics, and the statistics are all very close, but 100% of the business owners exit their business.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't realize when you say that, they go, well, how can 100% of business owners exit their business? It's because only 20% of business owners under this $50 million of annual sales successfully exit the business. In other words, they have a transaction,
right,
an actual exit that they would consider, okay, that worked for me. The other 80% have all kinds of other things go wrong, and that we could spend 2 or 3 hours on that. But the two things that people miss, and as someone who has been buying and selling businesses for 3 decades now, you understand
right,
that life happens. And what I mean by life happens is it could be an illness for you personally. It could be a key illness for your key people in your business. It could be an illness for a family member, or it could be more sudden. It could be an actual passing of a key person, of your business partner, of yourself or your spouse. That hole in the road, that bump, is not planned for, and business owners do not understand the chaos that ensues when this happens. If you have to go into a caregiver role for anyone in your C-suite or in your family, your hair spontaneously is going to catch on fire. And I say that having worked with caregivers for more than 20 years now, and it's not because you're not smart and you don't know how to run a business. It's that it takes all of what becomes a 24/7 job, instantaneously changes your world and places it all on you while you have everything else. In the case of someone passing, and not just some incapacity, it changes all the legal ramifications and the banking ramifications for the business. And people don't understand that sometimes businesses just close because the only person who had access to, one, make decisions or get money is gone, or the person who is in a relationship or married to that person who had all those responsibilities, legally their hands are tied and the banks want the money that has been lent to that business now. In other words, they're calling
right,
it out. So the answer is 100% of every business owner ultimately leaves the business.
Yeah.
Sometimes by design, which is where we try to help them, but in a majority of cases, not by design.
Now, I've talked to business owners before, and they said, well, I said, and we discussed, have you considered, creating an exit plan? They said, yeah, my wealth manager told me how much I needed to retire. Is that a definition of a exit plan, a number, and that's it? Or is there more to it than that?
Well, that is a great answer from the standpoint that knowing what that number is part of this longer, more complicated equation that has to be measured, monitored, and managed. And so anytime you're talking about succession planning, exit planning, or transition planning, it is a runway. It's a road that you have to go down. And if I could use an aviation analogy, I don't know how many people are watching this have ever been in a small plane where you get to see this take place, but if you go, me also, if you go to a smaller airport, you go to the small plane, you notice that they pull the plane out, they do a full walk around, they touch all the systems to make sure they're physically working. They then get in the plane and they pull out this long checklist of all the things that have to be checked and double checked before they even allow themselves to leave that area and start talking to the tower to get ready to go out. They also have to have filed a flight plan, and then they have to go through this process of taking off, which is a whole other checklist, which they then check off. They then have to fly to the destination talking to the tower, and then when they have to land, they have to go through the whole point. So knowing how much money you need is like knowing what city you want to go to when you're flying the plane, but everything else has to happen. And guess what? Along the way, the tower may reroute you so you don't get to land at that city because other stuff happens. So if you're using an aviation analogy to, is knowing the number important? Yeah, it's very important to start with, but there's so much more that has to take place. And all the checklists I've mentioned, leaving the hangar, getting to the beginning of the runway, taking off, flying in, landing, and going back to the hangar, all of those are analogous to all the other people around the room and at the table who have to be part of this conversation for it to be successful and not crash and burn.
Now, you've used the term, succession planning, exit planning, transition planning. Aren't those all the same thing?
Well, you would think so. And when we started the Business Transition Council, what we found was people were coming to the table and describing different things they were doing. So on our website, the btctampa.com,
right.
BoyTomCatTampa.com, we have the definitions there. And we didn't write a dissertation. We just made it pretty simple. Entrepreneurs are busy. They don't have a lot of time for a deep read. They rely on their trusted advisors to do the deep reading and give them the facts and give them things they can make decisions on. Succession planning has two main components, and there's a whole 10-step matrix and a process that goes around it, but basically it's two things. Every business, that owner who's watching this, who has a repeatable business, in other words, they have customers, they have invoices, they've got stuff going, they're showing up, they've got employees, they're delivering something, right? Either a product or a service or they're manufacturing something. That being the case, they have a repeatable business and they know how to do it. And that, in effect, is a great job. But what they do not have are every single one of the process and procedures that are required to do every single task for that business owner. Because when businesses start, they're small businesses, the business owner, the entrepreneur themselves, has it all where? It's in their head. Okay? And this is why businesses fail,
right.
Because they've got to get all of those tasks written down. And once they're written down, they have to then be used by everyone with the idea that you're trying to break the written task into even smaller steps or improve it. I'm going to give you an example which sounds ridiculous, okay? But it'll be real clear to you that all the tasks and all assets of your business have to have this. Let's say if you said, Michael, I need you to stand up, go over to the door, and close the door for me. We think, oh, that's pretty easy. But the first thing that happens when you say that to me is my mind has to visualize that, right? And as I'm visualizing that, I then have to put my feet flat on the floor, and then I have to get the muscles in my feet to push down, push up through the legs, push up through my core and gut, maybe even use my hands to stand up. Then I have to have a series of transactions, walking to the door. Then I have to understand how to hold my hand on the door, how to tighten the door, and then how to close it. As you see, that's a little ridiculous.
A lot to it.
But there's a lot to this. So you have to have all these process procedures. You have to have it in your accounting. You have to have it in your marketing. You have to have it in your sales. You have to have it in your manufacturing. You have to have it in all components of what you do to deliver what you do and how you interact with that client. Once you have that and you've got it out of the owner's head, which is a task in itself, right? You then, what the business owner traditionally does is they find someone that they give them half the information. So you have a bunch of minions running around who are not empowered to make decisions, nor have they been trained up to be leaders touching these pieces. So the first time the business owner goes, I'm going to take a long vacation, I'm going to go over to the beach, and guys, I'm taking off Thursday, I'll be back Monday, don't bother me. How many business owners who are looking at this remember when their business was like that and they tried to take that first 4-day weekend and how many phone calls they got? Okay, because everybody knows something, but they don't know all of it, and no one's in charge of doing it. So ultimately, we have to then train up all of these individuals who have that. Business owners don't work 40 hours a week. They trade 60 to 80-hour weeks so they can have the thrill of being self-employed and doing their own thing.
Very true.
The goal is, through this process, is to get them back to 5-10 hours a week so they have an asset they can manage and they're not doing all the work. Okay, that's the secret in this. So you have to go from repeatable to sustainable. So succession planning is all about process procedures and then training up the people. Exit planning, on the other hand, is about getting what you have in whatever shape it currently is in, and having someone else willing to write a check, have a transaction for you, to give you cash for what they perceive as value. And it doesn't matter if it's a $50 million check or a $500,000 check. The business owner wants to get paid. They want to have a transaction. And that's exit planning. And it's far more complicated than that. There's a whole number of people who have to be involved in that for that to happen. But that's really a transactional process. You also have to decide if you're going to sell inside or outside. And that we start going down the rabbit holes with the first question.
Right.
Now, transition planning is, and I'll give you two examples. It's about the personal transition and transformation of that business owner from who they are to who they're going to become once they've monetized, exited this business.
Wow.
Now, let me give you two examples. And many entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they got the virus of entrepreneurship and they're infected. And while it's been a thrill ride, it's been a roller coaster, they make terrible retirees. Okay, so two things have to happen to go through transition planning. One, you have to decide who you are and who you're going to become. So we can't say, "Oh, I'm just going to go play golf," because after 40, almost working towards 50 years of doing this with business owners, you can only play so much golf, so much racquetball, so much tennis, so much fishing, so much traveling. There's a point where you get all the bucket list done 4 or 5 times, and you got to be someone else. So if you want to be successful, you've heard me say this a dozen times, 80% of the business owners who actually get a transaction and get some monetization are showing signs of distress and being unhappy within 2 years. And the reason is they didn't know who they were becoming afterwards. Because if you've been, let's pick something simple. You've been the head of a trades type company, plumbing, electrical, construction, and your name is on the truck, and people see you all over town. You're Mr. or Mrs. Trades construction person, or Dr. Bob or Dr. Sally. Now that you've sold or, quote, left that business, everywhere you go, you still think of yourself as that entrepreneur, that business owner who had that, and quite frankly, you don't have it anymore, and no one talks to you or recognizes you in that capacity. Mm. That is one of the most shocking things that happens to retirees who have been business owners. They didn't do the personal transformation, the personal work of figuring out who they were going to be when they no longer had this profession or company around them to be who they are. Okay?
That could be pretty scary for some folks.
No, not only is it's scary, it's one of the highest things on the list of why they're dissatisfied. They just don't quite know what to do. And I call it the isms of human nature. But when you look at the psychological studies of what's happening to entrepreneurs once they leave the business and are successful or unsuccessful, that's when you see the rates of substance abuse. I call it the isms, and it doesn't really matter if it's racehorses or cars or boats, right, or whatever the thing is you're spending money to try to fill the hole in your heart of who you were before. It could be breakups in relationships or marriages, and it can also be the disintegration and some of the horrible things that happen with children and extended family that the business owner didn't recognize, and now they're kind of forced into that. So that's the first thing they have to do is, who am I going to become when I'm going there? The other piece of this is the personal transformation of becoming effective or knowing who you truly are, being self-aware, helps that process. But if you start that ahead of time, the ROI on transition planning is incredible for what it does to this C-suite, these people that you've been empowering with all these process and procedures. Matter of fact, I would say that transition planning should start when you open the business, because it eventually is going to happen. Sometimes it happens by default because the world shifts and something happens on top of you right away. Right. Or it could be because of a medical piece. I can't tell you how many business owners who are on the
Same,
second
sure.
and third generation who get to be age 45 or 50 and have the business shift for business reasons, not health reasons, and all of a sudden they're trying to reinvent who they are, and they're miserable
Yeah.
at 45 or 50. They not only lost the income, but they've lost who they are. So that transition planning has to be for the ROI of training who these individuals are, which are then going to impact your ability to step away and have time, but also who are you going to be when you're not the coach. I feel sorry for these this time of year when all these college football coaches get fired because they didn't have a perfect season, and now they went from I represent blank with his logo and they're somebody and everyone loves them, to either switching to another team where everyone immediately hates them,
Right.
and is throwing stuff at them as they're going to the plane, or that they're
team at all.
they're they're yesterday's paper, and it's being used to go in the trash bin. So those two things are critical about transition planning, and so with transition planning, succession planning, and exit planning, they're not all the same. They have different pieces, and what we discovered in the BTC, Brian, this is I think insightful, is that there are a whole bunch of experts, collaborative components that need to take place that helps the business owner end up on the other side of this. You want to be the 20% who successfully monetized your business, either inside sale to people you want to work with, outside sales, strangers you've not met before. And more importantly, you want to know who you are and what you're doing and what your why is, what your purpose is, once you remove the baby that you've built.
Love it. Love it. I am going to pause right here. Okay. So, Michael, let's go back and talk more about the membership. How does anybody get to join this, and what's that like? And I mean, don't you just need an attorney and accountant to do a exit plan? What? Tell me all about that. How they get there, and what do they need to be?
Well, that's two questions. I'll answer both of them.
It is.
One, it is more complex than just the attorney and just the CPA, and we can have hours on who sits around the table and what role they play. I'm glad to share all that with you. But who becomes a member? This was designed to be a learning organization. A learning organization is constantly evolving, figuring out what they know and what else they don't know, and then working towards trying to learn what they don't know collectively. I say this metaphorically, but this is a process. When we get with our meetings, all of the people who join are entrepreneurs or family business owners themselves, but they have some kind of specialty or skill set that another business owner may want. They could come from the finance world. They could come from the tax world, where they're talking about applied tax strategies. They could come from the legal world, talking about legal blueprints and the different components that they have of that. They may come from risk management, talking about all the risk factors that a business have, from property casualty to life insurance to long-term care to any of the components where you shift to a third party for risk, or any of the asset management sides. How do you manage particular assets, and more importantly, you have both assets that are publicly traded and non-publicly traded. How do you manage that? And you got to pull all that together. So it takes a whole group of people. But more importantly, this is the culture that we've kind of built, and this is when I say you could be a good member for the Business Transition Council, not because you're coming and saying, gosh, what's a good lead for me to meet a business owner?
Right.
Completely the wrong approach. And we let people know we're a learning organization. That's not what we do when we have been meeting for the last 20 plus years, first Tuesday of the month, talking about succession, exit, transition. What we want to know is, do you have a servant's heart? And when I say that, are you focused with a fiduciary mindset, and do you think of working for the client first? And if that's not how you're built, if you're more transactional than you are relational, culturally, you probably won't like the other people that you're in the learning organization with. The second piece, and this is not optional, this is really required, is you have to thrive on collaboration, because you cannot get through a succession, exit, and transition plan with you being in charge of the whole thing. You have to give up control and work with others who are really smart but have a very different brain and perspective of yours to serve the client and ultimately get them through this goal of succession, exit, and transition planning. The reason is to get through SET, succession, exit, and transition, you have to make a business repeatable, sustainable, scalable, and transferable. And those are very, very different skill sets. And the last thing is, and when I say this, people always laugh. But before I say that, I will say this about collaboration. I've not asked a person yet if they're a great collaborator. They like collaborating. They all say some version of what I'm going to say next. Oh, I love collaboration. You go first.
Yeah.
Okay? That being the case, what I learned was when I collaborate that I always go first, because people won't say that out loud, but they expect it because they're uncomfortable in learning how to do that. So you have to show them and teach them. And lastly, have you had the hubris beat out of you? Because you become very valuable in a collaboration when you have a fiduciary mindset, thinking of the client first. Once you recognize, when you have that aha and you're sitting around this collaborative meeting, holy cow, there's a lot of really smart people here, and I know a lot. I'm expert at this point in my career, but I'd never seen it that way. I'd never heard it that way. In our meetings, we talk about taking our glasses off. Many of us are older and have glasses. Pass them off to the right, so that you can see the world through the view of your collaborative partner. Right. Did that answer your question?
That's that's beautiful, beautiful. So, and what was it? Repeatable? Go through those things. Explain a little bit what each of those means.
Okay.
That was really good. That's great stuff.
I'll give you 20 seconds on it. Repeatable business means you have some customers. You've done well enough to have some customers. You're sending out some invoices. You're manufacturing something, or you're a professional, and you're seeing them professionally, right? Okay. That's a repeatable business, and that business you can work at, 30, 40 hours a week, or you can work 60, 80 hours a week. Okay. Most entrepreneurs go into business for time freedom and the ability to do what they want to do, and so they're doing some skill set or something, and it's repeatable. But for it to become sustainable, for it to actually become an asset, you have to literally be able to walk away from that business, because someone who wants to buy a business wants to buy a business that's not only running, but is systematized. True. And they can walk in and add money and either run it remotely or be more involved in it. But if they have to build all those things, then it's just a job. No one wants to buy a job. Right. The reason that franchises, and there are really good ones and there are those that aren't worth a hoot, are popular, is that it's easy to have a playbook of what to do. Some franchisors do a great job of training their people, others don't. We have members in the BTC who specialize in helping people figure out if they're good for buying a franchise or not. And we also have people who work with just buying and selling private businesses. You got to decide what's your fit, and those are people who sit around the table. Okay, repeatable, sustainable, right? If your business is not sustainable and you try to scale, it will blow up, and two things blow up more businesses than anything else. One, they start growing, they start getting a lot of cash coming in, but the cost to actually scale is far greater. They don't understand what their true costs are, and they run out of money. So their success kills them. Okay. The other thing is they run out of the process procedure side, where they're making plenty of money. They keep throwing money at that, but they cannot keep people trained at the right level to staff, in which case their service starts deteriorating and they start killing themselves in their scale because they didn't have the right people. That's not good. People or money are two things that do that. So to get to scalability, you have to have that kind of worked out first, so you're on track. And then transition planning, actually going through a monetization and having someone else take it over, which includes the succession planning and transition planning. If you haven't been working on that, you have a high probability of getting some money and finding out that you're one of the 80 out of 100 who are dissatisfied because you didn't do the succession planning or the personal transformation transition planning to go through that. Was that succinct enough?
Beautiful. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I appreciate the So the client, the people that would be served by, and this isn't really a referral organization, but people trust each other enough to say, hey, you know, so and so would be in the group. So we have I know that much about that. Who are the clients that are being served? Is it just a fresh startup guy, anybody whatsoever? You know, is IBM a good client? Or what, help me understand.
So
who those are.
publicly traded companies are not who we serve. We're working with those companies that are privately held. And what we found is once a company kind of grows beyond 50 million, and we have members who work with the 50 to 250, and they kind of work with that, you know, that middle market, upper middle market group. And some have even come from even corporate experience and now have moved down. Now that they're in Florida, they've moved down market and worked directly with entrepreneurs. They already have a lot of this already built, done, and so we're just not as valuable to them. But when you're below that, they don't have this built. And so someone who's a startup may find that there's just they're trying to figure out how to get a customer next week, and we may not be the best fit for that. But once they get into Main Street and they start making some money and they start having a repeatable business, and they, you know, somewhere between employee 3 and employee 7, the headaches start. And if they get to 10 employees, they probably have a whole lot of pain trying to figure out, and it's dawned on them, they haven't used these words, how do I go from having a repeatable business to a sustainable business? How do I get out of here, you know, one weekend a month and not carry it with me? And it's a real problem. So that, you know, yes, we could help larger businesses. Larger businesses already have a lot of these people already in place, and we do have members who work in that larger middle market. But we're really serving what we call the messy middle, that $2 million to $50 million of annual sales, who have a repeatable business and want to go through the process, but haven't understood how to define it or what to do. And so, yes, we do work together. We work together in ad hoc teams, not necessarily formally, but informally. And you learn to know what a person knows by solving these problems inside the meetings over a period of time. We have like 18 opportunities a year where our members come together and have these conversations and work on case studies or go through presentations where we're describing actual real world cases without the names of the people, of course, and figuring out how the group can collaborate and solve problems. Is that helpful?
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. What about industry-wide? Do they serve people of all different industries pretty much? Is there...
The 3 industries that would be most represented are professional service organizations, manufacturing,
okay,
and then all those other organizations that are making something, and I refer to that as having some kind of specialty license or skill, which we would call the trades. So it doesn't matter if it's big. Yeah, and so in Florida, I also say hospitality.
Sure.
And we have members who work in hospitality, but those would kind of be the 4 that people kind of go through. So a lot of people are specializing with the architects, the dentists, the doctors, the attorneys. Others are working with the smaller manufacturers, and then, you know, others are working with the trades, and then some are working in the hospitality, which could be anywhere from restaurants to hotel, coffee shops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, beautiful.
Does that make sense?
That's beautiful. I know the research shows like the number one thing sold when it comes to sales are the restaurant and the food, but the number one in dollar amount is the construction industry. If you add up all that they do, and I know this because I track different sales out there, but that's very insightful. And manufacturing is always another one. But it's not so easy for people to transfer it over. We talked a little bit about why that is. So if somebody's in their 40s and 50s, so do they just wait to plan after they get to 64 and they want to get out at 65? Can they do this in 6 months, or sit down, or what's involved in terms of ideally preparing to exit your business?
Well, you touched on something that touches on human nature, and it also touches on what's possible. There's no easy button. If you remember that commercial, there's no easy button to get from here to there.
Right.
We know that even bacteria resist, and so humans are more complex than bacteria, and so they resist doing stuff, particularly if it's not in their comfort zone. So can you wait to 64 and then miraculously make this happen in 6 months? The 100% answer is it is absolutely possible, highly improbable. So if 1 out of 1,000 could make that happen, that means it's possible. But 99 out of 1,000 fail, so it's highly improbable. If you want the statistics on your end, we would say you would want to start having this conversation 1 to 2,000 days prior to any big actions you wanted to take, 3 to 6 years.
Wow.
If you start working on your business instead of just in your business sooner rather than later, you're going to have the best chance to interview and bring the specialist around and get their input. You know, Brian, you and I have this conversation all the time, and we kind of chuckle about it because it's obvious to us from doing this, but it's not obvious to the business owners. Most business owners start their each new year with saying, I'm going to double sales, or I'm going to make my sales do X, and I'm going to get X profits from them. And they really believe that by delivering more of whatever it is, selling more, that everything gets better and all the problems go away. But what we realize is that hasn't happened in the past. It's never happened historically for them. Making those decisions, that's what they're going to do in the new year, will most probably not work. What does work is working on your business, making your business more systematized, all these process procedures that no one wants to work on, doing the work of training up the people, making your business, going from repeatable to sustainable, and working on the efficiency inside the business. You can triple the value of your business in probably 90 to 180 days if you just go back and focus on those things and actually follow the game plan of the professionals who are trying to help you do this, to do that. Think about this. If you had $2 million of cash flow, right?
Okay.
And your business got 1% better, that's what, 20 grand?
Okay.
At $20,000 drops the bottom line. That goes into the pocket of the business owner. What happens if they became 10% more efficient? That's $200,000.
Wow.
Would $200,000 be meaningful to the business owner if it was dropping into profit? Here's what we find. Most businesses are leaky. They have problems. We get in there, we figure out where that is, and we can help them there. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. As a person who evaluates businesses and helps people buy and sell businesses, if I've come up with another $200,000 in efficiency out of that $2 million business, which some people say, oh, that's too high. Let's make it a 5% more efficient business. And we found $100,000 that year. If you had an additional $100,000 of net profit dropping to the owner each year, Brian, what's the multiple that someone should think about even having a conversation about when they're talking to someone who's a merger and acquisition person or a business broker, someone who could actually monetize that business for them? What is $100,000 of extra profit worth?
Well, one common way is to look at what they call the market approach. Look at what other business sold for. These things range. It depends on the business a little bit, et cetera.
Sure.
But I mean, these are 3 to 6 times, or more. So 100,000 more could be worth another $500,000 in gain to an owner, or at least 400,000.
Right.
If the business is right and we're looking at the right numbers.
And
stuff like that.
so what would happen if they started 3 years out, and all of a sudden that $2 million business, which didn't do everything they needed, and people are unwilling to pay anything, or let's say they're willing to pay $250,000 or $500,000 for that $2 million of sales. What would happen if they actually did the work and each year they were able to increase that net profit by an additional $100,000? That's $300,000 based on your numbers, that's somewhere between $1 million and $2 million of actual value difference when it comes time to monetize. So the multiplication effect is incredible. I would say this: everyone here has gone to a doctor. Everyone here has had the doctor tell them you need to eat more vegetables, do more exercise, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 blah. And everyone goes, yeah, I know. Okay. Some people even get a nutritionist, some get a personal trainer, but then they fall off the wagon. But those who successfully do what the doctor has prescribed lose a little weight, gain a little bit more energy, feel a lot better, become more effective, and all of a sudden, 3 to 5 years of that behavior change, they're a completely different person.
Wow.
So
Right.
doing that work on the small piece, the making this much of an efficiency change can also make this much an actual profit change in bottom line. And this goes back to the first question you asked. Well, I work with a financial advisor. I work with a certified financial planner. They tell me this is the number I need. Well, you're probably picking a number of what you think you can sell your business for, and not to disappoint people, but if you don't have the other specialists actually understanding that, the number you're getting from the advisor may or may not be right.
Right.
And the quickest way to get to that number is through efficiency of the business, not sales. Did that answer?
No, that's a good point. So just because a business makes 200,000, if two identical businesses, otherwise in industry, age, and operation, they both made gross 2 million, netted 400,000, they might sell for different amounts.
Oh yeah, widely different amounts. Yeah, wildly different amounts.
And I share that because I see this type of thing all the time. So.
And this is a generational issue. I'm a boomer. Okay, we have the Gen Xers, and now the millennials are in buying businesses. Most, and I've seen this. If I've seen it 100 times, I've seen it far more than that. The baby boomer is not necessarily the person with the greatest technology skills nor the best record keeping.
Right.
Yet, if you're talking to a millennial buyer, all they want to do is electronically investigate what those two things are.
Yeah.
They want it all in want it all in technology, and two, they want it like by the end of the day once they've signed their disclosure agreement and the boomer seller can't even get it together because they that one of the things that the members of our organization do is help the business owner really get ready for that, prepare them emotionally, prepare them operationally with their team and people, and prepare them financially to be able to do all those things at once when the time's ready. I'm going to tell you a story that some people think, these old timers are talking about the old days. 2006, business owners were writing succession, exit, and transition plans. They're getting offers that were fantastic. It was go-go times, lots of money around there, and guess what happened? They didn't take it. Oh, I'm only 55. Yep. The market was ready to buy. They weren't ready to sell.
I know.
Those same business owners showed back up in 2008 and 2009 and said, I'm ready to get that $2 million offer.
Right.
But, well, you can't get anything right now because
nothing.
There's no money because you're ready to make the transaction, but the market isn't. So the whole reason that you start in the process early is you have to be ready when the market is, not when you are. That's if they take nothing else away from any of this they've listened to. That's a critical point.
And you just never know what's around the corner with an economy, or COVID, or
there's all kinds of things that
all the different things that we've done.
And if you go back, you and I were talking earlier about going back, and same thing happened in 2008. Same thing happened in the 90s. Same thing happened in the 80s. Same thing happened in the 70s and 60s and 50s. There's always a wheel falling off the bus somewhere in the society or business, and they all come out of nowhere and they all affect your business. So you've got to be ready all the time without regard to what life throws at you.
What do you think about, the guy says, well, I'm gonna give it to my kids. I mean, do the best laid plans? Obviously, I'm leading this up. They don't always work out, right? So, how do people prepare? Like, hey, my kids are gonna take over the business, and so leave me alone.
Well, the first question I always ask when I hear that is, have you interviewed each of your children individually and asked them what their strategy is or what their hope or desire is for taking over this business? Here's what we find. They go, no, of course they want the business. What they discover is they have 4 kids. They're lucky if one of them has an interest. I can tell you 1 to 2 of them off the top of the head will not want to do what mom or dad did in this business. They're going to do something else, okay? And of the 4, when you find the one who may want it, are they capable, okay? And not just because you love them and you're a child, but if you were hiring that person cold, do they have all the skill sets necessary to take this business and move it forward? Because if you're going to sell it to them, unless you've already, accumulated 20 times what your annual income is, set aside investments outside of your business, you're going to want something out of that business, some kind of payment, right, to do that, because you just don't have enough to just give it to them. And next I would add, psychologically, the worst thing you could do is give somebody something for nothing, because people only invest in that which they help create.
Yeah.
And so they have to have something, they have to have some skin in the game. They have to have some money, and they have to have some sweat and labor. So while it's great to say that, first of all, have you even asked them? Now, once you've asked them, have you even gone through the process, what we're talking about, repeatable, sustainable? Have they gone through all the hats that make a business run? And have they been trained up from the minion stage up to the C-suite stage and can run it? Because the person who was great at finance or operations may be terrible at sales and marketing. And if you have a business where sales and marketing is driving new customers, they're going to take over that business, and they can run it very efficiently, but it will die. So you gotta understand all of those components.
It's complicated. Ready, willing, and able. They gotta.
Right.
They have the money. Are they willing? Do they really want to? And are they able? Maybe they like all the free milk from the cows, but they're ready to run the dairy farm and milk. Get up at 4 in the morning or whatever. So.
No, that's a great story, and I can't tell you how many times. And in the process of when we're making a business repeatable, sustainable, part of the process is identifying and help people see themselves as they truly are. I can't tell you how many people have overconfidence about what their skill level is until they test out doing some of that and they realize they're getting some resistance either from the people they're working with or internally that's taking them off track. People aren't always able to see their own faults or where they're not effective at something. And they have mechanisms emotionally that they want to push themselves away from that, and no one likes to look foolish. And so many times people go into buying a business or taking over a business thinking they have skill sets, and all lessons cost money. And so there's never a failure, it's a lesson, and they all are expensive. And so the less you have to pay for those lessons, the better you're going to be.
That's great. You talked about some of the skill sets out there or the different backgrounds of the members, right? You mentioned risk management and accounting and attorney. What about the emotional side? You mentioned there's 3 different phases. You mentioned that.
Yeah. So we have a number of members who are transition or transformational specialists, and they come from a variety of backgrounds. But almost all of them have something in common. The 2 things they have in common is, 1, they've come from an entrepreneurial background, and 2, they come from a professional training background with some psychology skills. And when you put those 2 together, those people have some real world experience in helping people go through personal transition and personal transformation. And we have a number of them in our organization who have been members who are good. And we're open to it, having others join. This isn't a zero-sum game.
Sure.
The more minds we can get around the table sharing, willing to take off what they have, willing to teach, willing to collaborate, and recognizing they've had the hubris beat out of them and they don't believe they're the smartest person at the table, are welcome to learn more about us. We're glad to have a conversation with you.
Well, being that, because some of the people might want to join. I know that you all have like monthly meetings and some other stuff. What is the benefit of the different? Can you share a little bit about sort of the highlights of BTC works?
Yeah. Over the years, different members have asked for different things, and what we found is that time of day was important. For example, a lot of our meetings are monthly meetings are 7:30 to 9. Well, a lot of feedback we've gotten from mothers and fathers is that's family time for a lot of people. And while traditionally someone could always go to that meeting, it doesn't work that way, particularly after COVID, right? So we make those meetings virtual because a lot of times people are coming and joining those meetings from a car. Two, some people really prefer to have an educational symposium or educational setting where they get to network and be around each other for a couple hours. So we have these educational symposiums, which are open to the world, which we do a number of times a year, traditionally 3 times a year. And then we have true networking, a little cocktail, a little food, friend-raising, networking events 4 times a year in the evenings. And we do them on different days, different times, because certain members gravitate towards one or the other. There are very few members who thrive by going to all of them. But if that helps you why we did it, we took feedback from the members. Here's the kind of meeting I'd like to have, and here's how I'd like to learn more, and here's how I'd like to introduce others who are people I'm working with to this group of people I work with, and others who have heard about it but want to learn a little bit more about us in an informal setting may come to a symposium or may come to a cocktail hour to learn more about the group. That's one of the reasons we have the website, is to put some of that stuff up there, but we try to do all that to communicate with those who may be interested.
Gotcha. What about we mentioned the quality of the characters, the size of the business, and there's a lot of different industries. What about even if a business owner fits into that character, what do they have to have inside them that's willing to actually change? Isn't that a factor that works out, or does every guy say, "Oh, this is the best thing, Michael? Thank you. You changed my life."
Well, let's just go back to another analogy, and it's football season, so we'll use that one. What percent of these college football players who were stars, some even winning Heisman Awards or other awards, go on to the same level of success in the pros?
Yeah. Only a few make it all the way through the process.
Correct. And those who make it to the pros, how many become the Hall of Famers?
Yeah.
It's infinitesimal, right? And so there are 2 components that become really important. One, they have to have physical skill sets, right? That's why they got drafted. But then they have to have the emotional skill sets of resiliency, working through poor coaching, learning their blind spots and learning to become more coachable. Every single one of those NFL teams has a quarterback coach. You don't even get to be a bench warmer, 3rd stringer in the NFL if you already aren't at the top of your game. But the difference between the Tom Brady, right, and the number 3rd string quarterback, which most people don't even know their name or realize they're on the team, is not in their physical skill sets, it's in their emotional skill sets. And those emotional skill sets allow them to hit resistance, allow them to become coachable, allow them to change, to become resilient. Resiliency is as important as any other component, I would argue, and that's why they have quarterback coaches. And so the key here for entrepreneurs is you can be I can't tell you how many brilliant, smart people I've seen in a technical ability not be able to run a business. And I can tell you, I know a number of people who many people wouldn't say they're very smart, but I can tell you they're brilliant at being an entrepreneur. And so that they have learned that they don't have any of these skill sets, and they've learned how to find the people with the skill sets and get them to work as a team. So I would say it takes both. It takes a certain amount of technical ability, and more importantly, it takes the ability to become coachable. How's that? Is that helpful?
I love it. That's beautiful. So that really helps us think through the elements of what makes a successful transition. I know we've gone on for a bit here, but let's imagine somebody's watched this. What at the end of the time if a business owner is listening to this, what would the key thing or a few highlights that you hope somebody takes out of this presentation today?
Well, one of the things I would say is when you're picking your advisory team, maybe you've learned a few questions or a few ways of judging how they're able to collaborate, right? How effectively they can collaborate. because you can have the smartest A, B, or C, and I've seen this in all the professions. I'm not calling any one profession out, but there's always the smartest person who wants to be the smartest person in the room, and they actually impede the progress of the business owner going through succession, exit, and transition planning because they don't want to let go of, quote, what they see as control. So being technically competent is really important, but then finding that person who will be as honest with you as your ego can allow, to help coach you and help you see the things that are blindsided to you, because you're gonna pull a number of processes and things about yourself that aren't necessarily comfortable to pull this together to make yourself and your business so desirable that you can go through succession, exit, and transition planning. So picking the right team and then making sure that right team actually can collaborate, and then making sure you're giving them chances to collaborate. And if you're not getting satisfaction, that collaboration out of them, you need to find some other advisors who can join that team. And learning how to build a team around yourself may be one of the most important skills an entrepreneur can do. And you find people who are serial entrepreneurs, one of the secrets they'll tell you to their success is they've got an awesome team around them. And depending on the type of business, they may be using people from the same field, i.e. different attorneys, or different accounting people, or different wealth managers, based on what they were doing. So they've learned how to pick their team, and then they've learned how to maximize it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're going to do more and more of these. I know we've gone on for a bit, so I think we're going to wrap this up for now.
All right.
Michael, can you tell a little bit about how to reach BTC? Remind them one more time about it.
Yes, the way to reach BTC is to send an email to admin@btctampa.com. And if you have a question, it will be directed to the executive team, and among us will figure out who can get the best answer back to you. And that's boytomcattampa.com is the website. You'll find a lot of information there. We also have a directory because we're a not-for-profit and we're open. We put our information there on the directory. They're welcome to find us. And then if you find someone you might like, you may want to look at them on LinkedIn, maybe follow them on LinkedIn and seeing how they're interacting, how collaborative they're being with others, and that may give you some clues. But we're here to help. We're here to meet more of those who are trusted advisors to help hone their skill set, and we're glad to work with those 2 to 50 million in annual sales, because we recognize you're in the most pain, and we can probably do the most good in the shortest period of time for you.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.
This is Brian, Michael. We'll see you guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.